I'm Rachel Morales, 31, the granddaughter no one expected to show up. I wasn't on the guest list. I wasn't even supposed to speak, but I came anyway. Black jeans, thrifted blazer, hair still damp from the morning shower because I didn't have a hairdryer that worked. Grandpa's funeral was being held in one of those grand halls at the edge of town's St. Ambrose Memorial Chapel, the kind with oak pillars, velvet drapes, and a marble Jesus that seemed to stare straight through you. I stood outside, my palms sweating through the thin material of the black envelope I held, waiting for someone to notice me. My breath fogged in the cold, and the glass doors stayed shut. The sound of a string quartet floated from inside, soft, delicate, rehearsed. Through the frosted glass, I could see the relatives gathering in little clusters, nodding solemnly, adjusting brooches. My cousin Julia adjusted her fascinator with a tiny golden pin, and Uncle Theo was already holding court near the casket, likely rehearsing his eulogy in his head. They all looked like actors in a play. One I wasn't cast in. I tried the door. It clicked once and then stuck. That was when a man in a funeral home blazer stepped out from the side alcove and raised his eyebrows. "Sorry. Private service," he said, glancing down at a clipboard. "Are you with the immediate family? I'm Rachel." "Rachel Morales," I replied, tightening my grip on the envelope. "I'm his granddaughter." He scanned the list again, slower this time. Then he offered a half-apologetic smile. "I don't have you down. I'm going to need to check with the family before you come in." Behind him, I saw Aunt Denise lean over and whisper to someone. The man turned, stepped inside, and when he returned, his voice had changed, sharper. "They've asked that the service not be disrupted." "Disrupted," I whispered. But he was already gesturing politely. "Please leave." So I stood outside, in the wind, alone. My heels sank slightly into the soft grass near the stone curb, and I shifted my weight, suddenly aware of every flaw in my outfit, every sign that I didn't belong. And yet, I was his first grandchild. I was the one who used to sit on his lap while he read the newspaper. I was the one he gave the coin jar to, the one he let drink a bit of coffee when no one else was looking. Funny how none of that makes it onto a guest list. If you've ever been turned away from your own family's grief, just for not dressing the part or having the right name on a clipboard, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. I was about to turn and leave. I swear I was. But then a silver Cadillac pulled into the lot. It glided across the pavement like it belonged to the Queen of England, and out stepped a man in a dark gray overcoat, his scarf catching in the wind. He was older, tall, with a posture that announced wealth without saying a word. Everyone inside must have noticed heads turned. The door opened. He stepped in without hesitation. He didn't ask. And 30 seconds later, he stepped out again, this time with the funeral director practically trotting beside him. "You're Rachel?" the man asked. I nodded, stunned. He held up a thin black leather case. "Your grandfather left very specific instructions for you to receive this, and to be here." The funeral director went pale. "You may escort her in," the man added, not as a suggestion, but as a command. And suddenly, the door opened for me. The cold vanished. The music stopped. The room fell into a stunned silence. Every cousin, aunt, and uncle stared, and for the first time that morning, I felt their eyes trying to figure out what they'd missed. I walked past them. The envelope still trembled in my hand. But now, they were all watching me, and I could feel the shift begin. I didn't sit in the back. The usher guided me past the final row and toward the middle. Just behind the immediate family, Aunt Denise, Uncle Theo, my cousins, and their spouses. I could see the flicker of confusion ripple through them, like wind stirring dry grass. No one spoke. But their silence was loud. The man in the overcoat who still hadn't told me his name took a seat 3 rows behind, arms folded, just watching. The coffin sat at the front, closed, polished to a mirror finish. On top, a small bouquet of white calla lilies and an American flag folded precisely. Grandpa had served in Korea. He never talked about it, not even when I asked as a kid. But I remembered how he'd straighten his back every time the anthem played on TV, even if he was in pajamas. As the priest began to speak, I settled into the cushionless pew and tried to remember the last time I'd seen Grandpa. It had been 2 years. He was in a wheelchair then, thinner than I remembered, but still sharp. He asked about my freelance gigs, about whether I'd ever finish that novel I started in college. No one else in the family had asked me about that. I kept my eyes forward as names were called. One by one, people stood to speak. Julia, with her polished voice and perfect posture, read a sonnet she wrote at Yale. She'd only visited Grandpa twice in the last decade. Uncle Theo told the story of how Grandpa built the family's first home with his own hands. He taught us that hard work was sacred. He said that we rise by lifting others. I almost scoffed. I remembered being 13 and asking Theo for help with school fees when Mom couldn't afford them. He said we all had to pull our own weight. No one mentioned me. Not my mother, who hadn't been invited either. Not my younger brother, who couldn't afford the flight. We were the quiet branch of the family tree, the one trimmed away for aesthetic purposes. When the priest finally invited anyone else to share a few words, no one stood. I hesitated. My chest tightened. My hands were sweating again. I could feel Aunt Denise's eyes burning into the side of my face like a warning, but I stood anyway, and I walked to the front. The room didn't breathe. I didn't have anything rehearsed. No poem, no speech, just the envelope in my hand and a shaky voice that hadn't been heard in years. My name is Rachel, I began, and I'm the daughter of his youngest son, Marco. There were murmurs then, small, like wind through reeds. I wasn't invited today, I said plainly, but I came because I had to. Because the last time I saw Grandpa, he gave me something. I lifted the envelope. It's sealed, and I haven't opened it. But I think maybe now's the time. I turned it over. The back was stamped with his handwriting, imperfect but unmistakable. For Rachel. Read when the family is together. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a yellowed photograph. The photo showed Grandpa as a young man, holding a small child me on the front porch of the old house, before the siding was repainted, before the garden was redone, back when it looked like home. The letter was short. 1 paragraph. I cleared my throat. To the family I leave behind some of you new parts of me, some of you only the polished version. But to Rachel, I leave my truth. She stayed close when I had nothing to offer, and she saw me when others saw only obligation. To her, I bequeath what was hidden not for revenge, but for remembrance. Because real wealth isn't money, it's knowing who saw your worth when it was invisible. With love, Grandpa. I folded the letter, placed it back inside the envelope, and looked at the crowd. They weren't silent out of respect. They were silent out of discomfort. Thank you, I said, then walked back to my seat. The rest of the service passed in a blur. I didn't hear the final prayers, didn't register the soft notes of the organ or the way Aunt Denise clutched her pearls like a lifeline. It wasn't until we stepped outside, into the parking lot where the cold returned and the Cadillac was gone, that the crowd finally moved. And that's when Theo approached. You blindsided us, he said flatly, squinting against the sun. I read what he wrote, I said. He crossed his arms. He was old. He wasn't thinking clearly. Whatever he gave you, it doesn't change what's already settled. What's settled? I asked. He hesitated. The estate. I hadn't asked about money. I hadn't even known there was money. All I wanted was to say goodbye. I didn't come for that. I said quietly, I came for him. Theo didn't respond, just turned and walked away, shoulders stiff. I stood there alone until the lot was nearly empty. That's when the man in the overcoat returned. You handled that with grace, he said. Who are you? I asked. He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, embossed lettering, dark navy, Martin Ellison, estate attorney, your grandfather's, to be specific. I blinked. He wanted to speak with you several times before he passed. Said you were the only one who'd understand. Understand what Martin smiled faintly. Come by my office tomorrow, 10 o'clock sharp. He walked away, leaving me holding a card that suddenly weighed more than the envelope. That night, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment, the envelope resting on the kitchen counter. I made tea and stared at it as if it might whisper secrets. When Mom called, her voice cracked through the speaker. I heard what happened. She said, they wouldn't let you in. They did. Eventually. There was a pause. You okay? I think so. Did he leave you anything? Just a letter. Another pause. That sounds like him. Quiet, but firm. I'm meeting his lawyer tomorrow. Silence again. Whatever it is, Mom said softly. Don't let them make you feel small. You were his girl. I hung up and sat in the silence. Outside. The wind rattled the window pane. I thought of Grandpa in his wheelchair, handing me that envelope like it was nothing, and then watching me leave without ever saying goodbye. Whatever he left behind. It wasn't just money. It was a story. And I was finally ready to hear it. Martin Ellison's office was inside a building that smelled like polished mahogany and old paper, the kind of place where secret meetings had been happening for decades, behind doors thicker than most people's walls. It sat on the third floor of a historic downtown block, wedged between a boutique law firm and a silent elevator that hummed like it knew things. I arrived early, 10 minutes to 10, hairbrushed, coat buttoned all the way up, boots still slightly wet from the slush outside. I sat in the waiting area, trying not to wrinkle my thrift store slacks. A secretary with a quiet smile offered me coffee. I declined. My stomach couldn't take it. At exactly 10 o'clock. Martin appeared in the doorway. Come on in, he said, motioning toward the office behind him. It wasn't huge, just a large walnut desk, 2 leather chairs, and a wall of books that looked like they hadn't been opened since Reagan was president. But everything in that room felt deliberate, heavy, like it had weight. Martin walked around the desk and opened a drawer without sitting. He left this for you, he said, pulling out a small, fireproof lockbox. It had a brass handle and a thick latch, already unlocked. He placed it between us. Did you read it? I asked. I'm his lawyer, not his family. He said simply, go ahead. Inside the box were 3 items, a sealed manila envelope marked private, a worn-out bank ledger book with handwriting in tight, careful cursive, a tiny velvet pouch tied with string. My fingers moved first toward the envelope, but Martin cleared his throat. I'd suggest looking at the ledger first, he said. It'll give context. So I did. The first few pages were filled with old entries, 1978, 1984, lines like $50, pawn shop credit, and $120, cash paid to neighbor for borrowed heater. But toward the middle, the entries changed. 1993, 600 gold coins purchased from estate sale. 1995, won $200. Additional coins acquired Liberty. Krugerrand. 2001, gold bars 2, added from auction lot. 2005, relocated items to secure site. Page after page. Not huge sums, but slow. Steady accumulation. Mostly gold. All of it purchased quietly, without anyone knowing. I looked up. He was investing. Martin nodded. Your grandfather didn't trust banks. Said he'd seen too many people lose everything because someone else controlled the ledger. So he started buying gold. Quietly. Little by little. He didn't tell your family. He didn't trust them with it. I swallowed. So why me? Martin leaned back. Because you were the only one who ever came back when he had nothing to give. No birthday checks, no property, just an old man in a chair and a shelf of dusty books. My chest tightened. I remembered those afternoons reading aloud to him while he drank bitter tea, fixing his old glasses with tape, laughing about that time the dog ate half his newspaper. I never thought of it as loyalty. I thought of it as love. Martin tapped the velvet pouch. Open that. I untied the string. Inside were 3 gold coins. One was a 1911 British sovereign. The other 2 were American eagles, dated 1986 and 1999. They felt heavy in my palm. Real. Intentional. This is just a sample, Martin said. There's more. How much more? He paused. At last appraisal, over $400,000. I blinked. That can't be right. He nodded. He stored it in a private vault. The access code is in the letter. He left everything to you. I stared at the box, my fingers resting gently on the edge, as if it might disappear if I moved too fast. Why didn't he tell me? Martin exhaled. He wanted to see if you'd stick around without knowing. You did. There was a long silence. Then I opened the manila envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, no salutation, no sign-off, just Grandpa's uneven script across 2 pages. Rachel, if you're reading this, then I've finally done the one thing I always told myself I'd do: leave something behind that matters. And I hope this matters to you. Not for the money, but for the meaning. I spent most of my life believing that wealth corrupted people. I watched it rot trust, turn siblings into enemies, and make honest men lie. That's why I kept it quiet. I didn't want this to become another reason for people to knock on my door pretending to care. But you never pretended. When you showed up with that dumb poetry journal and a bag of groceries, I knew you weren't there to impress anyone. You were just there, and that was enough. I started this gold stash as a way to protect myself, but I'm giving it to you as a way to free yourself. Use it however you want. Pay off debt, build something new, or walk away from the ones who only see you when they need something. Just promise me you won't let it change who you are. The code to the vault is 3914. Ask Martin for the location. He'll help you. And one more thing, don't tell them. Let them wonder. Let them sit in their silence, the same silence they gave you. With love, Grandpa. I read the letter twice, then a 3rd time. When I finally looked up, Martin's face had softened. Not pity, just understanding. They'll come for it, I said. Won't they? Maybe, he replied. But they can't touch it. It's in your name. No contest clause. He was meticulous. I folded the letter slowly and slid it back into the envelope. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped out of my real life and into someone else's inheritance fantasy. But this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about being seen. He had seen me. Thank you, I said. Martin nodded. You'll need to decide when to access the vault, but there's no rush. Let the dust settle. I stood up, gripping the box. As I walked out, the secretary gave me a small smile again, this time with a glint of knowing behind it. As if she'd seen this before. As if she knew exactly what it meant when someone left an office a little taller than they entered. Back outside, the wind had died down. The sky was pale and sharp. I stood there on the steps for a long time, breathing in the air like it was the first thing I'd owned in years. I didn't go home right away. I took a walk past the train tracks behind the grocery store Grandpa used to visit every Wednesday. I could still see his old red cap in my memory, the way he'd carry his own bags even when his hands hurt. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just walked. The box in my arms, the letter in my coat pocket, and the quiet knowledge that something had shifted in the world, not in a loud, dramatic way, just enough for me to feel it under my skin. He hadn't forgotten me, not when the money started adding up, not when his body started to fail, not when everyone else turned his legacy into speeches and flowers. He left it with me, the truth, and the gold. I didn't tell anyone, not that week, not the one after. I moved through the days like a person pretending to be normal. I made oatmeal, washed dishes, sent out job applications I didn't care about. I even joined my cousin Julia's charity auction livestream. She was selling off Grandpa's antique cigar boxes for memorial funds. The comments were full of sympathy and PayPal links. I watched her raise over $2,000. None of it was going toward Grandpa. I could have exposed her, sent a screenshot of the vault's contents, even posted the letter. But I didn't. Grandpa hadn't just left me gold, he'd left me silence. That's what made it powerful. By the third week, the calls started. Aunt Denise first. Rachel, sweetheart. Just checking in. I heard you spoke so beautifully at the funeral. I wish we'd had more time to catch up. I held the phone away for a second. Thanks, I said. I didn't expect to speak. Oh, but you were lovely. And listen, I meant to ask, did Grandpa ever give you anything unusual? A key? A note. You know how he was. Always writing things down. Straight to the point. No seasoning. No, I said. He just gave me a letter. She hesitated. Anything worth keeping, just memories. A long pause. Well, that's special too, she said brightly. We're putting together a little family scrapbook. You know, would love to include anything you remember. I'll think about it. I hung up before she could keep digging. Theo called next. His tone was different. Less syrup. More smoke. I'm going to be blunt, he said. If he gave you something valuable, you need to declare it. I don't owe you anything. I replied. You owe the family the truth. I gave them that at the funeral. They ignored it. He exhaled hard. Don't be naive. Whatever he gave you, it was probably a mistake. He wasn't well. You think a box of coins makes you the queen? No, I said. But it does make me the one he trusted. He hung up. I stared at the phone, my hand trembling. Not from fear, from fury. The kind that had nowhere to go except back into the stomach. That night, I opened the bank vault. It was across town, inside a facility that looked like a modern fortress, gray stone walls, keypad entry, security cameras with red dots blinking like they knew my name. I brought the code, 3914, and my ID. The receptionist called Martin to confirm, then buzzed me through. I followed a security guard down a hallway that smelled like new paint and dust. We passed rows of metal doors, each with a private number. Mine was 422. Inside was a single shelf. 2 fireproof containers sat side by side. One was the size of a shoebox, the other, larger, heavier. I opened the smaller one first. More gold coins stacked, labeled, cataloged, Krugerrands, maple leafs, French roosters, Chinese pandas. I recognized almost none of them. The other box had bars. 4 gold bars, stamped and sealed. I reached out and touched one. It was warm from the air, smoother than I expected. My fingers shook, not because of greed, but because I felt, suddenly, like I was holding every conversation Grandpa and I never got to finish, every birthday card he never sent, every apology he couldn't bring himself to say. He'd put it all here, in gold. The security guard waited in the hallway. I closed the boxes, locked them, and stepped out. He nodded, didn't ask questions. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table and laid out everything I'd seen. Not the gold itself, but the weight of it. The fact that I could, tomorrow, pay off my student debt, move to another city, start over. But I didn't want to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted them to see me exactly where I was. 3 days later, Julia emailed me, subject Grandpa's Legacy Video Project. Hi cousin, hope you're doing well. We're making a tribute video to Grandpa and we're wondering if you could contribute a short message or story. Maybe a favorite memory. It'll be shown at the family brunch next Sunday at Theo's place. Would love to include you in some way. Some way. The brunch, of course, was never offered to me directly. I didn't reply, but I recorded a video anyway. I stood in front of Grandpa's bookshelf, the one I'd begged them not to throw away when he passed. I'd claimed it off Craigslist after it mysteriously went missing during the estate cleanup. I sanded and restained it, and now it lived in my apartment, filled with secondhand books, old cameras, and an empty pipe stand that still smelled faintly like tobacco and lemon oil. I stared straight into the lens. I remember Grandpa telling me once that trust doesn't show up loud. It shows up on the quiet days, the boring days, the days when no one's watching. I paused. He didn't care about appearances. He cared about presence. And the one thing he never stopped doing was listening. Even when no one else heard me, he did. I smiled once and stopped recording. I never sent it to Julia, but I knew she'd see it soon because I sent it to someone else, Martin. I asked him to play it the day the will was formally read. Not at brunch, not in some curated slideshow, but in the room where everything legal happened. Let it live where it belonged in the ledger of things that couldn't be rewritten. 2 weeks later, I got a call. Aunt Denise. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're making things uncomfortable. For who I asked, for the family, for all of us who are trying to move forward. I didn't speak. She continued. You think that letter makes you special? That video, you think you can just rewrite history because he left you some trinkets. It wasn't a trinket, I said. It was his voice. She snapped then. You'll regret isolating yourself. We're your blood. I almost laughed. You only remember that when something's at stake. Click. I turned off my phone, and that night, I made a plan. Not for revenge, not to flaunt the money, but to build something. Something quiet, like Grandpa would have wanted. A place with open doors, where no one needed a guest list to be seen. I started with a spreadsheet. Nothing flashy, just columns for ideas, cost estimates, timelines. I used the same cracked laptop I'd had since college, keys a little sticky from spilled coffee, screen hinge loose on one side. It felt like a quiet rebellion, building something with the same tools I once used to scrape by. The plan was simple: open a neighborhood co-op cafe and reading space. One that didn't demand perfect resumes or polished shoes, where someone like Grandpa could sit for hours, sipping tea, watching the world move around him without feeling like a relic. Where people like me, people without pedigree, could be heard. I wasn't trying to become a mogul. I just wanted to build something that would have made him proud. The name came to me one night while standing in the kitchen, staring at his old letter again. He'd written, "Real wealth isn't money. It's knowing who saw your worth when it was invisible." I wrote it down, then circled 2 words. Invisible worth. That was the name. I trademarked it, bought the domain, made a logo on a free design tool and printed it on a sticky note that I stuck to the fridge. It looked small, but it felt real. Martin helped me find a space, a closed-down laundromat near the bus line, big front windows and an alley out back. Rent was manageable. The inside was a mess: peeling linoleum, cracked ceiling tiles, water stains on the floor, but I saw it. I saw the warm lighting, the mismatched chairs, the shelves lined with donated books, free to borrow, a quiet piano in the corner, a notice board filled with poems and first drafts and scribbled notes from people who'd never been published but had something to say. I didn't tell anyone in the family. I worked in silence, signed the lease, hired a contractor, met with the local zoning office. I spent hours in thrift stores hunting for furniture, and more hours watching YouTube videos about plumbing permits and how to tile a backsplash without screaming. I kept Grandpa's gold bars in the bank, but I sold some coins through a reputable dealer Martin connected me to. Enough to fund the first 3 months of work and still have breathing room. Every time I walked into that dusty old laundromat, I heard his voice in the back of my mind, not giving orders, just humming a tune, the way he used to when he built birdhouses from scrap wood. Some nights, I stayed until 2 a.m., scrubbing walls with vinegar and baking soda, just to get the ghost of mildew out of the air. I didn't feel tired. I felt like I was repaying a quiet debt no one else even saw. Then, one Saturday, 3 months into renovations, someone knocked on the glass. I looked up, still holding a paint roller, speckled with primer. On the other side of the window was Julia, hair tied back, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She looked like someone who'd taken the wrong turn into the wrong part of town and wasn't sure if she should get out of the car. I walked to the door and opened it halfway. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She glanced around. "This is yours." "Yeah, you're opening a business?" I didn't answer. She smiled, tight and uncertain. "It's kind of amazing. I mean, none of us knew you were doing this. Wasn't really for you to know." She shifted on her feet. "I came because, well, I heard from Theo. He says you're still holding on to something that should be shared. Grandpa's things." I crossed my arms. "What things?" "The gold. The letter. Whatever he left." I nodded slowly. "He left me a letter. He left me silence. He didn't ask me to share either." She frowned. "Come on, you can't really think that's fair." I leaned against the doorframe. "You remember the Christmas when I brought him a scarf I'd crocheted? I was 15. She blinked. Vaguely. "You laughed. Said it looked like something from a thrift store." I was joking. "No, you weren't. You thought I was pathetic. Everyone did." Julia opened her mouth, then closed it. I took a breath. "This place, it's not about proving anything. I'm not trying to take revenge or parade around with money. I'm building something that matters, something he would have walked into." Nodded quietly, and sat down in without needing to explain himself. She looked past me, at the half-painted wall and the box of secondhand books near the register. "Can I help?" she asked. After a long pause, I didn't answer right away. Then I stepped aside. "You know how to paint only my nails." I handed her a roller. "Good enough." She stayed for 2 hours. Didn't talk much. Just painted. We didn't speak about Grandpa again. Not that day. But something settled between us. Not peace. Not yet. Just a truce built from shared silence and primer fumes. As the weeks passed, the space came together. The ceiling was patched. The old sink was replaced. We put up shelves and strung soft yellow lights across the front windows. I installed a chalkboard where people could write one thing they'd never said out loud. The first message read, "I miss my brother." I don't know how to say it. I didn't erase it. I let it stay. By the time the soft launch came around, I'd sent out one invite to Martin. He arrived in a charcoal suit, as always, with a folded newspaper under his arm. He didn't stay long, just walked the space, nodded at the layout, and handed me a simple envelope. Inside was a certificate of trust, The rest of Grandpa's gold. Officially transferred into a long-term fund under my name. I figured you'd want a buffer, Martin said. In case things get hard. They already are. He smiled. And yet, here you are. He left without needing thanks. The cafe opened quietly. No fanfare, no balloons. Just a chalk sign outside Invisible Worth. Open today. People trickled in. A teacher, a mechanic, a young woman crying into her coffee, typing something on her laptop with furious energy. No one asked for ID. No one asked who belonged. Everyone did. And that was the point. That night, after closing, I sat by the window and looked at the city breathing outside. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the letter. Folded. Soft at the edges now. Use it however you want. He'd written, just don't let it change who you are. I hadn't. But I had changed what I could do. That was enough. I didn't expect Mom to visit. She'd known about the cafe. Of course I'd told her once the lease was signed, but I figured it would be months before she made the trip. She lived 2 hours away and worked weekends at the retirement home. Her world was measured in shifts and overtime, and she didn't do well with change. But one Tuesday morning, while I was restocking muffins and wiping down the back counter, the bell over the door chimed. And there she was. Same thrifted denim jacket. Same old sneakers. Her hair pulled into the same tight bun I remembered from childhood, only now with streaks of gray. She didn't smile right away, just looked around. Smells like cinnamon, she said softly. We bake fresh every morning. She stepped further inside, nodding at the shelves. The bulletin board, the soft jazz playing overhead. Then she looked at me. You did all this. I wiped my hands on a towel. Yeah. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she walked to the chalkboard and read the notes. I still sleep with the light on. I forgave her, but I never told her. I almost didn't make it this year. Her face changed, quietly. She reached for a piece of chalk. I turned away to give her space, moved behind the counter, pretending to clean again, even though everything was spotless. When I looked back, she had written, I wish I'd told my daughter I was proud of her sooner. My chest ached. When she returned to the counter, her voice was thick. You know, your grandfather, he was hard on me, harder than anyone else. I know. I used to think he just didn't care, but near the end, he asked about you a lot. Always asked if I'd spoken to you lately. Said you had something most people lose by adulthood. What was that? She smiled faintly. Hope. We sat down at a corner table. She ordered tea. We didn't talk much, but her presence felt full. Before she left, she slipped a folded photo onto the table. It was old, taken from some forgotten album. Grandpa, much younger, stood beside a beat-up truck, holding my mother as a child in one arm and a fishing pole in the other. I thought you might want it, she said. I do. When she hugged me goodbye, it was tighter than it used to be. Not rushed, not half-hearted, just warm. By summer, Invisible Worth had become a local curiosity. People started calling it the Secret Cafe, not because we advertised it that way, but because it didn't feel like a place you stumbled into. You heard about it through a friend. You passed by it 3 times before realizing it was open. It was small, quiet, glowing from within like a lantern. And still, I said nothing about the money. To the customers, I was just the girl behind the counter. To the community board, I was a young business owner with a funny name and a mission. To the other local cafes, I was competition with weirdly generous prices and no clear explanation for how I was still afloat. I didn't care, but the family did. It started with whispers. Julia came by one afternoon with a scone order, lingering by the window longer than usual. You know Theo's been talking about contesting the will, she said, almost casually. He can't. I know. But that doesn't stop him from talking. Let him. She hesitated. He's trying to reach out to the lawyer. Says it's suspicious you got everything. I looked at her. Is it? No, she admitted. But they need someone to blame. I thought they blamed Grandpa. They're running out of ways to do that. I nodded. Then I guess they'll try me. She didn't argue. 2 weeks later, I received the letter. Certified mail. No return address. Inside one sheet of printed paper. Formal language. Barely masked aggression. Dear Miss Morales, it has come to our attention that certain assets left behind by the deceased may have been misrepresented in the allocation process. We are requesting voluntary disclosure of any items, funds, or written communications that may affect the equitable division of said estate. Failure to comply may result in formal review. No signature, just a typed name on behalf of interested parties. I called Martin. They're bluffing. He said immediately. They have no grounds. The estate was legally transferred. Every document notarized. Every clause reinforced. Why now? Because you built something they can see. I exhaled. Should I respond? No. Let me handle it. He filed a formal cease and desist on my behalf. Sent it directly to Theo's firm. A copy of the will was included. So was the paragraph Grandpa had handwritten about his choice. Still, the damage had a scent, like smoke after a fire. People started asking questions. Even a local paper reached out, wanting to do a feel-good piece on the cafe's mysterious funding and its sudden success. I declined. This wasn't a PR story. This was sacred. One night, long after closing, I stayed behind to sweep. The chairs were stacked. The lights dimmed to amber. I found myself staring at the chalkboard again. The most recent line read, I lied about who I am for years. I just wanted to be accepted. I ran my fingers over the words. Chalk crumbled under my skin. Then I heard the bell. I turned. Theo. He looked older than I remembered, gray creeping into his hair. His tailored coat wrinkled. He didn't ask permission to enter. I stood my ground. This is nice, he said, glancing around. Too nice. For someone like you. I didn't reply. You think you're better than us now? No, I said quietly. I think I just stopped needing your approval. He stepped closer. You know he should have left it to the family. I am the family. You're the leftover. The words stung more than I expected, but I didn't flinch. He trusted me. I said, he pitied you. No, he watched you ignore him, perform for his inheritance, and still treat him like furniture. He didn't pity me. He chose me. Theo's face hardened. I won't forget this, he said. I hope you don't. He left without another word, and when the door closed, I sat down at the counter, heart pounding, not from fear, but from freedom. That night, I pulled out Grandpa's letter again, read it one more time. Then I folded it into a clean glass frame and hung it beside the front door, where everyone could see it. No one noticed it at first, but I knew it was there, and somehow, that was enough. Fall came quietly that year. The trees turned in slow, reluctant waves, maples bleeding crimson near the rooftops, birches fading to a dusty yellow. I kept the cafe windows open longer than I should have, letting the dry leaves scatter across the floor and curl in corners like forgotten notes. People liked the chill, the smell of nutmeg, the warmth of the back corner where I'd placed Grandpa's old chair. No one knew it had been his, but every so often, someone would choose that exact seat, exhale, and say something they hadn't said out loud in years. I haven't written since college, one man said, sketching in a notebook. I'm 6 months sober, a woman whispered. her fingers wrapped tight around a chipped mug. I still think about the baby I lost. Someone else wrote on the chalkboard, signing only with a heart. I didn't interrupt. I didn't advise. I just refilled mugs and wiped counters. And waited. That's when I saw her. Denise. She stood outside for a long time before coming in gray wool coat, polished boots, her perfume catching on the wind like roses pressed between legal briefs. She didn't look around, didn't scan the shelves or ask about the coffee. She walked straight to the counter and removed one glove. "I want to talk," she said. I nodded. "Okay." Privately. I led her to the back, where we kept a small office space barely big enough for 2 chairs. I pulled the door shut behind us. She sat carefully, as if even the chair's modest fabric might wrinkle her pride. "I've seen the papers," she began. "The legal filings, the videos, the letter." "You mean the one he wrote me?" She ignored that. Theo was foolish to threaten litigation, but that doesn't change the fact that what happened was divisive. It fractured this family. I folded my arms. It wasn't the inheritance that fractured it. It was everything before. She exhaled sharply through her nose. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said softly, "but I think I'm finally separate." Her eyes tightened. "He should have told us." "He did. You just didn't listen." Denise reached into her handbag and pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was a ring-plain gold band, slightly warped, with a tiny emerald embedded in the center. I recognized it immediately. That was Nana's. I whispered. She slid it toward me. "He left this in my drawer. No note, no context. But I think it was meant for you." I didn't touch it. Denise looked away, then back again. "I envied your father," she said suddenly. "Marco was always the favorite, even when he messed up, even when he left. Dad always kept a place for him." I didn't argue. "Maybe that's why I was hard on you," she added. I finally met her eyes. "Do you regret it?" She paused. "Then sometimes." That was the closest I'd ever get to an apology, and it was enough. I closed the box, placed it gently between us. "I'll keep it here," I said. "In the cafe." Denise didn't argue. She nodded, stood, and left without another word. When I returned to the counter, a young man with ink-stained fingers was waiting for his order. "Was that your mom?" he asked, not unkindly. "No," I said. "That was someone else." Later that week, a girl came in crying. Couldn't have been older than 19. Hair dyed pink at the tips. Hoodie stretched at the elbows. She asked if we had a bathroom, then disappeared inside for 15 minutes. When she came out, I handed her a muffin and said nothing. She took a bite, then sat near the front window and stared out at the street. I watched her from the counter, fighting the urge to ask, to solve, to fix. Eventually, she came up. "Do you ever feel like no one in your family sees you unless they need something?" I nodded. "All the time." She exhaled. "I dropped out. From nursing school. My parents don't know yet. They're gonna lose their minds." "What do you want to do?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe write, then write." She smiled a little. "It's not that easy." "No," I said, "but neither is living someone else's life." She left her email and promised to come back. I found a note taped to the chalkboard the next morning. "Thanks for making space for people like me. I didn't take it down." By Thanksgiving, the cafe had become something more than a business. It was a refuge. People donated books weekly. Someone left a typewriter. Another donated a stack of handmade journals tied with twine. There were open mic nights on Fridays, small readings on Sundays, and one impromptu marriage proposal near the poetry shelf that made everyone in the room cry, including me. And through it all, Grandpa's framed letter stood by the door, quiet and unmoving, like a compass. I often caught people reading it on their way out. They never asked questions. They just nodded slightly, as if it had answered something they hadn't voiced. One night, after close, I went through the final ledger again. Every gold coin was accounted for, every bar secured. I'd only sold what I needed. The rest remained, untouched, waiting for something. I didn't know what yet, but I'd know when it came. That night, I lit a candle for him. No ceremony, no prayer, just flame, silence, and thanks. I whispered 3 words into the dark. You were right. A week later, I got a letter. Not from family, not from Martin. It was handwritten, in careful script. Dear Rachel, you don't know me. I was stationed with your grandfather during the war. We reconnected briefly years later. When he reached out about selling me a few coins, I didn't buy them. But we talked. Long talks. About family. About you. He said you were like gold. Not loud. Just real. Just steady. He told me once. I gave her something small. I hope she makes something real. You did. I saw your cafe in the paper. I recognized the name. Thank you for proving him right. Frank M. I folded the letter and slid it into the frame with Grandpa's. They belonged side by side. I didn't cry. I just felt full. Not rich. Not successful. Just seen. Winter came late that year. Snow didn't fall until mid-December, and even then, it came in hesitant flurries, like the sky was trying to remember how. I kept the cafe open late on those cold nights, the windows fogged with breath and steam, the smell of cinnamon and clove thick in the air. People came to escape the cold. Yes, but more than that. They came because they knew this place held something warm that wasn't just temperature. I kept the lights dim. I played old jazz and lo-fi records. I gave away more drinks than I sold, and no one asked why. I didn't need to explain. One Friday night, right before closing, a man walked in with his coat still dusted in snow. He looked around like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be there. His eyes landed on me, and he paused. Are you Rachel? He asked. Yes. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small parcel, wrapped in plain brown paper. Your grandfather left this with me years ago. Said to give it to you. If I ever saw your name in a newspaper. You saw the article. He nodded. I used to run a pawn shop. Your grandfather was one of my best customers. I took the parcel gently, the paper soft from time. Inside was a book. Not a printed one, but a leather-bound journal handwritten, every page filled. The first page read, For the Things I Never Said. I flipped through slowly. It was a mix of memories, stories, reflections written by Grandpa in tight, slanted script, thoughts on fatherhood, on regret, on the war, on loss, on me. She reminds me of the part of me I buried when I chose silence over explanation. Rachel sees what others walk past. I hope one day she realizes that's her greatest strength. If love can't be spoken, let it be written. By the time I reached the last page, I was crying, not sobbing, just letting it happen. The man waited patiently, hat in his hands. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded. He was proud of you. Said it before he could barely speak. He left before I could ask his name. I sat there long after he'd gone, the journal on my lap, the cafe lights low. And for the first time since the funeral, I let myself grieve not for what had happened, but for what never got to. I didn't open the cafe the next morning. I put a sign on the door closed today. Please take care of each other. Then I drove out of town, 2 hours on winding roads, through pine groves, past frozen lakes, past places that still bore Grandpa's name on old registers, his handprints in wood, his echoes in corners, no one dusted anymore. I arrived at the cemetery just before noon. His grave was modest, flat stone, nothing fancy. I brought coffee and a sandwich, sat cross-legged beside him like I used to when I was 8, waiting for him to finish the paper and let me read the comics. I placed the journal beside the headstone. "I got it," I said. "All of it." The wind didn't answer, but the trees rustled gently behind me. "I used to think you owed me something," I admitted. "That the silence, the absence, it meant you'd forgotten. But I see it now. You were just holding space for me to step into it on my own." I sipped the coffee. It was cold now. I didn't mind. "Mom came by," I added. "We're better. We talk now. Slowly, carefully." I smiled a little, and Julia helped paint the ceiling. Denise brought Nana's ring. "It's on the shelf by the register, next to your picture. I think you'd like it there." I didn't say anything more, just sat with him, the way we always did best, quietly, side by side, letting the silence say what words couldn't. By January, the chalkboard was full. Too many confessions, secrets, and small unburdenings to count. I erased it, finally, and hung a clean slate. The first new line was written by a teenager with green hair and shaky handwriting. "This place feels like what I wanted home to be." I stood there for a long time after she left, not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. Theo never came back, not in person. But one day, a manila envelope arrived with his firm's letterhead. Inside was a typed note, short, sterile, unsigned. "We will not pursue any further action. Consider the matter closed. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence." And I was fine with that. Because some people choose noise, others choose absence. But I had chosen something else entirely. Presence. One snowy afternoon, Julia returned. This time, she wasn't wearing heels or makeup, just jeans, boots, a hoodie. She ordered a tea and sat at the corner table. When I brought it over, she looked up and smiled. "I quit my job." I raised an eyebrow. "I couldn't do it anymore," she said. "The performative grief, the branding of memories. I want something real." "Got a plan?" "No. You want to help with open mic night?" She smiled. "I can do that." And just like that, we began again. Not as cousins, not even as friends, but as people who once hurt each other, and then stayed anyway. Spring arrived early the following year. The cafe bloomed with its open windows, soft sun, a new round of regulars who brought more than coffee orders. They brought pieces of themselves, laid them down between sips and pages. Let the place hold their weight for a while. I no longer counted revenue. I counted returns. I counted the man who came back every Saturday to read his poems aloud. The mother who left post-it notes for her teenage daughter on the fridge wall near the register. The little boy who insisted on paying for cookies with drawings. I counted the woman who came in on her divorce day and left a note that simply said, "I thought I was going to break." But then I came here. I didn't frame it, but I kept it, folded into the drawer beneath the register, next to Grandpa's old pocket knife and a coin from his first gold purchase. I still dream of him sometimes, not as an old man, but as he looked in that photo, young, grinning, lifting me onto his shoulders like the world couldn't touch us. And in those dreams, he never speaks. He just nods once, like he always did when I got something right. And then he fades. And I wake up, and I open the cafe.